In a time when the world seems to be on fire, you need those friends and allies. And Canada is that country that has always been our partner. Looking back onto trade, I'm sure we just need to deepen that. We've listened to Prime Minister Carney in terms of really looking at Europe as our partner. It's very much mutual.
Since the start of his second term, President Trump has unleashed a wave of tariffs that many partners describe as a tariff tantrum. Duties ranging from 10 to 50% have unsettled global trade, and even close allies have not been spared. Canada has responded by tightening its ties with Europe, not only in trade, but also in defense. Ottawa is exploring a submarine program with Germany, highlighting that even close U.S. allies are willing to turn to Europe for major procurement projects. And Canada is not alone. Other trade partners, from India to Switzerland, have shown similar signs of looking beyond Washington, turning toward European suppliers as a way to answer Trump's tariffs. These moves are not routine adjustments in defense planning. They are seen as political responses to Trump's tariff policy, reminders that allies and partners can use defense procurement as a form of pushback. Starting with Canada. The 88 F-35 fighter jets ordered in January 2023 remain on track, with deliveries set to begin in 2026. For reasons tied to NORAD and NATO integration, Ottawa has little room to reverse course. By exploring German submarines for the Victoria-class replacement, Canada is showing that not every major contract will automatically fall to Washington, a reminder that tariffs carry political consequences even in the defense sphere. India offers another clear example. Only weeks before the tariff hike, New Delhi had signed a $4 billion agreement for 31 MQ-9B drones from the United States. Once Washington lifted tariffs on Indian exports to 50%, talks for more American P-8I aircraft were paused. Instead, India is moving ahead with new French Rafales and keeping deliveries of Russian S-400 systems on track. Halting a U.S. deal was a direct way to show displeasure without breaking existing contracts. Brazil has followed a similar path. Faced with a 50% tariff, Brasilia is leaning harder on Sweden's Gripen fighter program and slowing new contracts with American defense firms. This recalibration is widely viewed as a symbolic response, a signal that Brazil will not simply absorb the tariff shock without answering in kind. Spain made its position crystal clear. In August 2025, Madrid announced that the F-35 would not be part of its future air fleet. Instead, the government doubled down on the Eurofighter and pledged heavier investment in the European FCAS project alongside France and Germany. The choice underscored a political stance shaped by ongoing disputes with Washington. And then there is Switzerland. The country's 36 F-35s remain on order, but debate has intensified since Trump's tariff announcement. Parliament and the press are questioning whether scaling back would be an appropriate way to push back. Even a traditionally neutral country is now weighing its defense deals as a tool of political messaging.
Taken together, these cases form a pattern. No country has severed ties with the United States, but each has used defense procurement as a way to answer Trump's tariffs. For Canada, diversifying into Europe while keeping the F-35 deal intact sends a dual message. For India, halting P-8I talks was a calculated pause. For Switzerland, the debate itself is a form of protest. Brazil and Spain are steering toward European suppliers, linking defense choices with wider frustration over tariffs. Defense contracts, once treated as untouchable pillars of alliance, are now part of the response playbook. Trump's tariffs have not only unsettled global trade, they have turned weapons purchases into instruments of political retaliation.
The headline here is Trump expands 50% steel and aluminum tariffs to include 407 additional product.
I got a problem with that guy. He's signing all these forms, Cleveland Cliffs.
President Donald Trump has once again expanded his trade war. The White House confirmed that tariffs of 50% on steel and aluminum now cover hundreds of additional products. What began with raw materials now includes car parts, refrigerators, baby strollers, even the aluminum in soda cans. For American families, this means higher grocery bills and more expensive cars. For U.S. partners like Canada, It disrupts exports that depend on metal packaging and industrial inputs.
And why doesn't he just stay in the U.S.? Because I'm done with this guy signing letters saying, yeah, bring all the steel down to the U.S., tariff the crap out of Canadians.
This is not just a technical trade measure. It is a shock that links everyday costs with international trade tensions. Let's take a closer look at what this expansion means inside the United States and across North America.
The Trump administration is quietly making it even more expensive to import hundreds of items that all of us would see on store shelves. Well, a whole bunch of household items impacted, and some industrial items too. Look at this: cranes, bulldozers, wind turbines, rail cars.
For consumers, the most immediate effect is inflation. CNN's reporting highlighted that import prices rose sharply in July, defying the White House claim that foreign exporters would absorb the tariffs. Analysts such as Pantheon Economics stress that American businesses and households are carrying nearly all of the cost. That cost is not small. Supply chain experts have estimated that the expanded tariff list now covers around $320 billion of products, creating roughly $160 billion in extra expenses that flow directly into the economy. Industries tied to steel and aluminum are already reacting. Farmers and builders depend on tractors, gearboxes, pumps, and construction machinery now hit by higher tariffs. Legacy manufacturer John Deere recently announced layoffs at 3 Midwestern facilities, citing weaker sales and the impact of tariffs on production costs. When major employers respond this way, the shock spreads into local communities. The administration's stated goal is to rebuild American steel and aluminum. Yet investment in those sectors requires billions of dollars and long-term certainty. The process so far has been anything but certain. Economists describe it as a policy direction that may be defensible in theory but clumsy in execution. This uncertainty, now often called Trumpian uncertainty, discourages companies from expanding or hiring because tariff rules can change with little warning.
We aren't going to roll over. We aren't going to kiss his backside. We're going to fight like we've never fought before.
Trump's tariff expansion has not gone unanswered. Canada, America's closest trading partner, has pushed back on 2 tracks. At the public level, Ontario Premier Doug Ford has taken direct aim at Washington. He calls the tariffs a hidden tax on American families, noting that Canada buys more than $350 billion of U.S. goods each year. Ford announced a $70 million Canadian program to support workers, pressed Ottawa to tighten quotas on cheap steel, and made it clear Canada will not roll over. On the federal track, Prime Minister Mark Carney has chosen strategic patience. He has directed aid to sectors such as lumber and agriculture while keeping negotiations with Washington open. His government insists Canada will only accept a fair deal, not a short-term fix that weakens national interests. Ford and Carney show 2 sides of one response. Other provinces have also voiced strong opposition, while unions, industries, and policymakers align behind the same message. Canada is standing firm, defending its workers and industries, and refusing to be cornered into a bad deal. The expansion of steel and aluminum tariffs is more than a policy adjustment. For Americans, it means higher prices when inflation is already a concern. For businesses, it adds uncertainty that discourages long-term investment. For Canada, the answer has been resilience. Ottawa and the provinces are backing workers and reinforcing supply chains, sending a message that they will not accept a bad deal. Trump's strategy may unsettle markets, but it also reveals which partners are prepared to stand firm. The coming months will show whether these tariffs strengthen industry or simply confirm that trade wars rarely produce clear winners.
It's not tenable to have, 35+% tariffs on an industry like this. It's not tenable to have 50% tariffs on an important sector like steel or aluminum or copper, because the inputs that go into the United States ultimately are then borne and paid for by American businesses, manufacturers, right, importers.
In early August 2025, across North America, the signs of a deepening trade clash are impossible to miss. In Windsor, auto workers wait to see if their jobs will survive the next round of policy shifts. In New York City, a family-run toy store closes after more than 4 decades. And in Washington, President Donald Trump signals no intention of easing his tariff campaign. Canada's response is not to retreat, but to reinforce, protecting key industries, supporting workers, and holding its ground in talks that could shape the continent's economic future. Former Canadian Minister of International Trade, Mary Ng, has called these 35% tariffs unsustainable for both sides. While they raise costs for Canadian exporters, the higher prices are ultimately paid by American manufacturers, importers, and consumers. She points to the deep integration of the North American supply chain. Over 90% of Canadian exports to the U.S. remain USMCA compliant and tariff-free, including autos and energy. Her position is clear. Canada should secure a good deal, not just any deal. Ottawa is also strengthening ties through the CPTPP and agreements with Europe and Asia to reduce reliance on the U.S. This diversification, combined with the ability to keep compliant trade flowing, gives Canada leverage at the negotiating table.
The Ford government has announced a $1 billion program to provide emergency loans to businesses in sectors hardest hit by U.S. tariffs.
We know businesses are facing tremendous uncertainty, and we will continue to protect Ontario's workers, businesses, and jobs from the impacts of U.S. tariffs.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford has rolled out a $1 billion Canadian emergency loan program under the Protecting Ontario Fund. It targets businesses in steel, aluminum, and auto manufacturing hit by U.S. tariffs. To qualify, companies must have at least 10 employees, $2 million in annual revenue, and must have already used federal tariff support programs. Loans range from $250,000 to $40 million, repayable within 6 years. The aim is to stabilize payrolls, facilities, and essential costs, preventing layoffs or closures. Ford pairs this with efforts to keep major automakers in Ontario by promoting tax cuts, GST reductions, and pressing the Bank of Canada to lower interest rates. It's an active defense of Ontario's industrial base rather than waiting for U.S. concessions.
On his 200th day in office, President Trump slapped new tariffs on dozens of countries around the world.
Most recent CBS News polls show that Americans increasingly believe the economy is good, but the majority expect prices to rise in the coming months.
U.S. companies, they're navigating these shifts in real time.
While Canada strengthens its position, the U.S. is seeing its own pressure points. One example featured on CBS Evening News is West Side Kids. 90% of its products came from China, leaving it exposed when new U.S. tariffs hit Chinese imports this summer. Already competing with online giants, the store could not absorb the added costs or the drop in consumer spending after the tariff announcements. It shut down permanently. Small businesses in the U.S. face this challenge nationwide. Without the buying power or storage capacity of large retailers, they are hit quickly by higher import costs. Many consumers pull back on spending as prices rise. The Yale Budget Lab estimates the 2025 tariff measures will cost American households an additional $2,200 to $3,800 per year, a burden that falls hardest on lower-income families. This latest tariff clash highlights two very different strategies. Trump is using economic pressure to push Canada toward his terms. Canada, under Prime Minister Mark Carney and with provincial leaders like Doug Ford, is countering with targeted support at home, active diplomacy, and a refusal to settle for a bad deal. Meanwhile, the fallout is visible in the U.S., where small businesses close and consumers face higher prices. This is more than a trade dispute. It's a test of endurance. Canada is signaling its readiness to withstand short-term strain to safeguard long-term gains, while Trump faces the question of whether his tariff strategy can deliver results before the costs at home become too high.